Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from. Hello and welcome to another episode of Veeam Industry Insights. Jason, what are we at now? Is this 34?
This is 34 weeks that we have got a chance to share some ideas, 4-ish, talking about what's going on in the industry, grabbing research from various sources, including our own, and hopefully making the world a better backed up place.
Amen to that. And, who would have thought quite some time ago that similar situation would still be in existence? But like you say, very happy, very thankful that so many people are tuning in. And we've got some, in my opinion, really excellent research for you. Jason and I are going to do something a little bit different. This is the third part in a 4-part series of what we believe is the industry's largest data protection survey ever, not just this year, but in the history. And Jason and I have each been in this 31, 32 years each. And what we're going to do, Jason, is we're going to unpack some details on 2 specific questions. Before we do, I want to invite everyone, give a shout out in the chat, in the comments about where you're tuning in from. We'll take a look at that about maybe halfway through the episode or so. And certainly if you have any questions, any comments, we'll love to address that as well. I see we've already got Brazil and we've got some areas of Europe highlighted. I'm in Colorado.
Nice.
Jason's in Texas, our producer's in Georgia. We have a production assistant in Europe. We've got some folks already typing in. So as you can see, our goal is to get this map as green as we can. So give a shout out where you're from. And like I say, if you do have a question, do have a comment, please enter that as well. We'd love to have a dialogue with you. So without further ado, Jason, maybe just really quick, take us through where does this research come from? We've said we think it's the biggest, but how did we get this data?
Yeah, so this is, I don't know, I think this is like the 6th or 7th year that Veeam has asked an outside industry analyst firm to go and do research where we've asked, hey, here are the big things that we want to know about. And then the analyst firm goes out, they develop the questions, they go out to an unbiased set of enterprise organizations. And in fact, in the personas, we have IT implementers, we have IT decision makers, all the way up through CXOs. This year, because we really wanted to, you don't actually need 3,000 data points for any particular piece of research, but you do if you want to cut it by country and by region and by vertical. And so, yeah, we have 3,000 enterprises represented from 28 different countries around the world. The full report is not quite out yet, but there's 2 of what I think of are my favorite 2 slides in the whole darn thing that we're going to get nerdy on today and look at the future.
Awesome. Without further ado, let's tee this up because like you say, these 2 data points and arguably this first one, we talk about like the money question. This is the money question. And we asked, as you can see here in the kind of middle print there, which of the following would drive your organization to change its primary backup solution to a new solution or service? And then we also asked this year, what would be the most important? So you could choose all, that's in the darker green, and in the lighter green, if you only chose one, meaning the most important, what would that be? This is just a fantastic question because it, as Jason mentioned, it's unbiased. No one knows that the Veeam was asking this. And what we did, then if we go look at what was the number 1 driver for change, I think this is interesting. Let's highlight that number 1. And Jason, it probably no surprise, but give us your thoughts on that.
So, this is the 2nd year that reliability has topped the charts. Last year, when we didn't ask what was most important, it was also the most common request out there. This year, it's actually the number 2 most common request. Actually, the SLA-centric one kind of peaks a little bit. But still, when you could only choose one thing, if there's one reason to change your backup solution, it's so that it would work better. Right. And I just find that amazing to me that in 2021, in fact, I did a keynote last week for a partner, and the topic of conversation was, why are we still talking about backup in 2021? And the reason is because reliability is still too low. So I think it's really interesting that the number 1 reason, when there only can you choose one, number 2 overall, they just want it to work better. They want to get what they paid for. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And, we don't want to trivialize this too, because I think there are valid reasons why reliability remains elusive. Obviously, this is the number one reason you back up so that you can recover, so you can restore.
Sure.
But if we think about it, the workloads are getting more varied. We're not retiring systems and technologies as fast as it seems like we're rolling out new ones. You think about roughly the last year now, for sure the last 9, 10 months, global challenges, which are very familiar, but you've got multiple hypervisors, increasing cloud activity, as a service, consumables, the list goes on. So it becomes challenging to try to achieve that reliability. But let's look at number two. Oh, go ahead.
Let's make sure that we don't throw, everybody in the industry under the bus. It's not that, everybody's sending out, cruddy stuff.
Right.
Some of it's cruddy, but not all of it. But, more often it really is just about that changing dynamic. Also, admittedly, a lot of it comes down to skills, right? So do you have the right skills? Are you relying on metal that's too old, right? There's a lot of extra outside things, but at the end of the day, they want their backup solution to work. Right, that's the number one. So let's look at number two, though. So number two, once you've solved for does it work better, or can you rely on it? Number two is just economics, right? And so that's actually the number two in the chart. But there's actually three different economic vectors on this set of data. There's the top one, which is I want to get more value out of my backup solution, right? So I want to improve the ROI, I want to improve the TCO. Step down a couple notches, I actually want to pay less. Right? And there's a difference there. So I want to get more value out of it. I want to pay less for it. And oh, by the way, I want to change the way that I pay. I want to change from a capital expenditure model to an OpEx expenditure model. So economics is certainly a large bevy. You could almost argue, I guess, if you add the three most importants together, what do we got? 9, 16, 22%. So for 1 in 5 organizations, the most important thing is economics.
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about what's been going on over the last year, certainly a lot of organizations are running lean, and cost optimization is something that we've always seen. Cost always matters. And as you point out, there's a lot of ways to express cost or nuances to the cost equation. Probably no surprise that it raises up to number two here in its various incantations and forms. But I think what we see here too is a shifting landscape. To your point, people want to change their cost models, so it's not a static environment. So,
no, but let me pile on one more thing though. I think it's interesting that value matters more than price, right?
True.
Because what people are saying is they're actually trying to get more value out of their capabilities. So it's not just I want to pay less, which by dynamic would give you ROI TCO, but they actually want to recognize more value. And I think that's interesting in where you talk about where does orchestration and governance and integration and a few other things we'll talk about later, but value actually trumps price. It's all just economics though.
Yeah, good point. So alluded to it, but let's look at the number three driver for change, why you'd switch a product. And cloud. We've been talking for years about cost, capability, complexity. And last year we started to say maybe there's a fourth C in there, which is cloud. And sure enough, it does exhibit itself here. Cloud, and specifically from moving on-prem data protection to cloud-based data protection services. Now, in part, you could say there's a tie in there with the economics, meaning the CapEx, OpEx model. But in particular, I think it's a growing realization that workloads are moving. Things are being born in the cloud. We've got lift and shift taking place from the data center. And of course, Jason, we're not suggesting the data center goes to zero anytime soon. But I think if we've learned anything over the last maybe 3/4 of a year, the shift to the cloud, embracing cloud-based services, is certainly on the rise.
Yeah, you can't have an IT modernization conversation without talking about where does the cloud fit. Now, interestingly enough, when we talk about cloud and data protection, we might just be talking about cloud-based storage augmenting an on-prem data protection solution. You could be talking about turnkey backup as a service. You could be talking about disaster recovery as a service and leveraging cloud infrastructure as your redundant infrastructure for an otherwise on-prem or hybrid architecture. There's all kinds of different ways that cloud fits within a data protection dynamic. Dave, I got to admit, one thing that kind of pointed out to me as you unpack these first three for us, though, if you think about these first three are actually pretty intrinsically connected with each other, right? Certainly in many organizations, the cloud works more reliably than what you have on-prem. Right. In many organizations, you will get more value out of a cloud hosted infrastructure than you do out of on-prem because you're paying by the drip, right? So that consumption model starts to get in there. So you could argue these top three are actually pretty interrelated, that
Right.
leveraging cloud better is going to give you better ROI, is going to give you better TCO, and almost invariably give you better reliability.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because just like we were saying, there's so many interconnected reasons why proper data protection remains challenging, in some cases elusive. The drivers for what would change your orientation, your mindset about the past investments you made are also, they're multiple, they're varied, but they're interconnected. So let's look at the fourth reason why someone might actually change solutions. And here comes our old friend again. It's just capability. It's just amazing that the common challenges year after year, literally decade after decade, oftentimes remain those common challenges. But it's capability, and much like cost, Jason, it's capability across a couple different dimensions, isn't it?
It is. So we talked earlier about they want it to work better, meaning more reliable, but they want to shrink their RPO, the amount of data that could be lost. They want to shrink their RTO, the recovery time, how fast they can get back up again. And in my mind, whenever I see that, what I hear in my head is it's not just about backup. Right? Backup alone is not enough. You got to be combining that with replication. You got to be combining that with snapshots. That's how you're going to reduce your data loss window. That's how you're going to increase your ability to recover. And then while you are increasing your capabilities, please, oh God, please do not increase your complexity of management while you're at it. Right? So increase your capability, reduce your complexity flow, which means as you're adding replication and snapshots and CDP and everything else, please don't use separate tools for all that. It is manageably not sustainable. Don't do that. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, there's a case of where, multiples of things actually doesn't yield a better result. It actually creates an overhead associated with it. There's a cost overhead, a management overhead, there's a diagnosis. There's just so many reasons why that can exhibit a challenge. So we do have a question coming in, I believe, from Gabina, which says, what's the best way to be prepared for Veeam certification aside from Veeam University, or should that be enough with Veeam resources? We do have a variety of Veeam certified engineer VMCE classes. We've got a number of resources out there. In fact, some of our Veeam enthusiasts, we call them vanguards, our Veeam champions, they have taken it upon themselves to create a number of different either question and answer books or materials, even host a number of YouTube videos that go through that as well. So I would say the great news is a lot of resources out there, meaning Veeam Vanguard materials. If you search under VMCE, or even just Veeam certification, but that acronym V, M, C, and E will get you just really a treasure trove of information. Jason, anything where you would add on that?
Yeah, I think my first certification was in like 1992. And I've been through all of them for Novell and Windows and a bunch of others. And I got to tell you, when I sat down and actually took the VMCE classes, I was so impressed at how professional, how succinct that data is. One of the things I do love about a lot of the videos that our vanguards and also that our technologists do, though, is a lot of vendors, they put out videos because something is really complex and they're teaching you how to do that. What I love about what some of the vanguards and the technologists are doing is they're putting out videos saying, look how simple this is. This is cool, right? It's a very different way to do education. But yes, check out the Veeam videos from our community, and then the VMC classes really are just spot on.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you for the question, by the way, Gabino, and keep them coming. So let's wrap up, Jason, just what we've just spoken about in this first data point here, meaning drivers for change. And it does come down to four main areas that we've highlighted: reliability, economics, and that's economics expressed in a few different ways, cloud, and then capability. And if there was like a little 4B in there, I guess complexity probably reared its head into capability as well. But reliability, economics, cloud, and capability, that's really what we see right now from 2,800 global professionals saying that would be what would drive them to change. So,
Yeah.
Jason,
You should
maybe
take a
we
screenshot of this. This would be a good one to catch a screen on and your homework would be go compare this to what is it that's the bane in your data protection's existence back home.
right. And, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't point out that if you do feel like it's time to make a change or you want to augment the solutions that you've got, this is a good way to have really a decision framework, how you want to go evaluate other solutions, whether it's Veeam or anything else. If these are the top global pain points, then you owe it to yourself to, as Jason said, see how you stack up against that. And if you think it's time to make a change, here are some good decision-making criteria that you can have.
It's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah. Figure out what is it that your problem statements are. Prioritize those. Ask your own peers within your own organization, what is it that really matters? What are we trying to get? Right.
Yeah.
And then with an unbiased lens, go out and start assessing, who really does exemplify that. It's a great way to start the conversation.
Brilliant. Well, as we transitioned into the next question, let's take a look at our global map. I think we've got over a dozen countries now.
There we go.
Yeah, look
LATAM
at that.
in the house. All right.
LATAM representing, yeah, for sure. Ireland, Brazil, Czech Republic, Qatar, Malaysia, Argentina, Sri Lanka, France, Switzerland, Spain, and we've got Saudi Arabia, India, Nigeria, and a couple places in the United States, different states as well. So really awesome to see such global participation. And one of the things I think is interesting, oftentimes we try to keep this more vendor neutral, but I can't help but recognize Veeam with 400,000 customers, over 180 countries, and just a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of interest. It's fantastic, and we're certainly appreciative of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got to give props to LATAM for this week. So a fantastic representation down there. It would be great if Canada and Russia would weigh in, though, because then the whole map lights up green, and that just
it is amazing. Yeah.
What a great way to start the week. All right, so we talked about the first major question. The first major question was what's going to drive change, right? And that's pragmatic, that's operational, that's what you ought to be looking at in 2021. The other measured question, though, is as organizations continue to modernize, they want to make sure that data protection is going to be more modern than what they need, and it's going to be there for the workloads of tomorrow. And so our second question of the day was really around what does modern look like? Right? Specifically, which would you consider to be the defining aspects of a modern or innovative data management or data protection solution for your organization? And again, if you can only pick one, what is most important from that?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting here, if we just look at the results, if you could check any, meaning the darker green line, look at how evenly distributed that actually appears, roughly speaking. But you've got a low of 29 and a high of 36 across, two handfuls of responses. And, basically people are looking for quite a few things, meaning modern at first blush means a number of different things. But I like how you stacked rank this in the choose one, what's most important. Did that surprise you? If we look at what's number one?
It did not surprise me. I guess the two things, if you look at the two extremes from the darker greens, if you look at the two extremes, the highest one was DRAS, right? And so if you're thinking about how that comes together, I think that's really interesting. We're going to talk about that. I also think it's interesting that we talked about economics on the last slide, and yet when you talk about what does modern look like, economics is actually the least likely part of that economic conversation. It's important. Yeah. It's roughly a third of organizations, but that's not the driver. The driver is around capabilities that are new. And the number one, what does modern look like? Modern backup looks like disaster recovery, right? We see that blending of those capabilities. That includes two things. One, orchestration and workflow, where people don't want to break out that 3-ring binder and run those scripts, right? They don't want to go find those batch files and then wonder why something breaks. They want to automate. They want to orchestrate. They want to get the humans out of the way when the chips are down. They just got to get running again. So I think workflow and orchestration, I thought that was really interesting. That was the number one, paired very nicely beside that with they want to use the cloud as their secondary infrastructure. Less and less organizations want to have secondary redundant metal on-prem and some other data center waiting for bad things to happen. In fact, when you add those two together, we've got 27% of organizations. So for 1 in 4 organizations, the determining factor, what does modern look like? Backup looks like DR.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could see some threads coming through. I mean, from the first question, things like issues around availability, and certainly right here, DRAS, disaster recovery, coming up high. We think about automation and workflows, being able to ensure that you are truly recoverable. I mean, looking at number two, very interesting, kind of a continuation as well here, and that is integratability. I don't know if that's actually truly a word, but I love it, and that factors into a couple different things here. And I'll actually turn it over to you to talk first on that. But I think we're seeing some pull through trends from the last question exhibit itself, even in this question.
Yeah, I love the fact that in the IT world, any word is a legitimate word as long as you add enough hyphens to it. So in this case, integratability is officially a word. What I think organizations are saying when they're responding this way is basically they're saying, I don't want to have to go and do my production stuff and then step away from that and go over and go do my data protection stuff separately. They want data protection to be an integrated part of a broader set of IT initiatives. And so what you see here is you see workflow and orchestration, right? So that's automating the disaster recovery itself. You see right behind that the idea of integrating data protection as part of the production platform. When I provision. When I provision new workloads, let's go ahead and just automate the protection of those workloads at that time, right?
Right.
If I had my Veeam shirt on, oh wait, I do. If I had my Veeam shirt on, I'd point out this is a beautiful thing about tags, right? You create a VM, you put a tag on it, we inherit those tags, and all of a sudden protection policies are defined. Don't have to go into a separate tool. And then right behind that, how do I get my reactive parts of data protection to be part of my comprehensive proactive cybersecurity mitigation strategy? So it's all about making data protection a better citizen and collaborator with the rest of your IT strategy.
Yeah, and you alluded to it, I think, earlier in the first question that, with new technologies available in backup and recovery, backup isn't at the tail end of this chain or spectrum anymore. So there's a reason why backup can play a role, certainly in data security, certainly in the way that you're looking to manage and organize your data center. So we're finding that interconnectedness nature of things is exhibiting itself again. And let's look at number three. If this was like the equivalent of the world map, it checks a lot of boxes or lights up a lot of countries, doesn't it?
It does. We talked about it earlier. The world is getting cloudier, right? So we saw disaster recovery as a service earlier, but there's other ways that cloud fits into this. The ability to move workloads from one cloud to another, and I love that because what it means is that no one wants to have that vendor lock-in of I throw it into one cloud and it gets locked in there. I want to be able to move that. The ability to move from on-prem to the cloud, the ability to use different cost models, the ability to standardize, and this is a big one. The ability to standardize the protection policies between how you protect your on-premise resources and how you protect your cloud resources. And that's huge because as the ones above it tell you, workloads are going to move.
Yeah.
Right? This is not reactive. This is about fluidity. Where's the best place for the workload this month? Move it there. But keep protection consistent. And I think that's huge. That speaks to the maturity of where this market's going.
Yeah, and I think you've always said in the past, the cloud isn't one thing. There is no the cloud, right? It is an implementation model and arguably a consumption model as well that's multifaceted, highly varied. So multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, the ability for on-premises to still participate in that. I think that's why we're seeing so many different aspects pop up in here. And also, I think, don't you feel like, Jason, this is a bit of a future-proofing concept as well? I mean, you're right. Data workloads are going to move. They're either going to move or they're going to be born in different locations. However, organizations want to make sure that they're not boxed out as well. They want to make sure that whatever they do today doesn't preclude them from being able to have flexibility going forward.
Yeah, I think the key word for 2021 has to be flexibility, right? If 2020 taught us nothing else, it taught us be prepared for what you are not prepared for, right? And so in this case, we talk about how does that go to cloud? You want that flexibility. You want the ability to move through that, but you should not be sacrificing data protection while you're at it.
Yeah, good point. Let's just do the recap on this. Really three that we looked at in terms of what does modern look like. This is also a great way to consider how you can evaluate products. So disaster recovery is number one, integratability, number two, and then a variety of different cloud capabilities, number three. Oh, and actually, we got a comment from someone in Luxembourg that says they're implementing Veeam as a backup solution in his company now. Awesome to hear.
Oh, thank you for that. That's awesome.
Very, very cool. So let's wrap up, Jason. One more look at the world map. I think we do have a few more countries that have come in. And well, yeah, for sure we do. We have got Mexico there,
There you
going
go.
South America. We've got Paraguay. If we go back over into UK and Luxembourg, who we just heard from, Turkey, United Kingdom, the Netherlands. So outstanding. So, Jason, we're actually not completely done with this research that we're going to be sharing. We're going to actually tee up another aspect of it 1 week from today.
Yeah, so this will be the fourth of the four parts. So we started January as a four-part series. The first part was how is COVID affecting IT,
Yeah.
right? And so that's certainly, let's get the elephant in the room. Let's talk about that and how we're moving into 2021. Last week, we kind of looked at more of the problem statement. What's wrong with backup today? We looked at failures and RPOs and RTOs and backup success and recovery success and perception problems. This week, we started taking more of a forward look on what's going to drive change, right, in data protection solutions. What does modern look like? Well, as we talked about that very last slide, what does modern look like? Modern looks cloudy,
Yeah.
right? And so next week, we're going to finish that series looking at what does cloudy data protection look like moving forward. So giving you more of a prescriptive lens on how to discern between the myriad clouds that are out there and what cloudy data protection ought to be. Again, unbiased research, all four of these. This has been such a fun project to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely has. And, again, whether you're a Veeam customer or not, or you even considering Veeam, I think you owe it to yourself to see this information because it is the industry's largest survey ever undertaken. And as Jason says, we'll have the fourth and probably we'll have some additional parts and nuggets that we'll parse out over time. But in terms of really focusing on this, we'll have our fourth part in the series 1 week from today. Until then, thank you everyone for joining. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.